Hello, this is Mark. This will be an interview with Victoria Applegate, aka Ross Applegate, and that will be explained in the interview. I hope you enjoy it. Okay, this is Mark, and I'm going to interview Victoria Applegate, and she's going to tell you how that came about. So, take it away, Victoria.
Hello, I'm Victoria Applegate, and I was the drummer and singer in Rocket back in the 70s and 80s, in the band Rocket. And a lot of you probably, or some of you may have wondered whatever happened to Ross Applegate. And the truth of the matter is that early on in my childhood and early adolescence, I suffered from a condition called gender dysphoria, and in 1987, I came out as transgender and began the process with the help from psychiatrists and psychologists and surgeons and whatnot. I began the process of transitioning from male to female, and that process took several years, and in 1991, I had sex reassignment surgery, and for the last 30 years or so, have been living as Victoria. And there's a lot involved with that. During that time, the last 30 years, I worked for several major corporations and had to remain employed. So it wasn't something that I brought up a lot, and there are a lot of friends I have that have no idea that I was transgender at the time. Not that I was ashamed of it, but in those early days, and not so much recently, but in those early days, it was sort of a bigger deal than it is today. So this is really the first time that I've come out in a public forum and talked about it. But anyway, that was me. And I was that person back then. Now I'm Victoria. And I want to thank, first of all, I want to thank Mark and his sister Jeanette for doing this YouTube project. And I'm very flattered and honored that they have, that they feel our music and what we did at that time is worth still remembering. So thank you very much for that. And wanted to put that out there right up front, and I want to thank everyone that remained friends with me through the years and knew me from before. So you're very special to me. So that's who I am, and so I think that answers the first question.
Okay, that's very nice, and thank you very much. So how long have you been in music before you joined Rocket?
Well, let's see. Now, Rocket was in the 70s and 80s, and I grew up in the 60s. My first experience playing the drums was I got my first drum set when I was about 13 years old, and I was in junior high school. And first band was in junior high school called the Cinnamon Light Bulb. And also we started a band in the music department called the Swamp Gas Brass. And at age 14, I had my first paying job at the Stone Church in Gilroy, California with the Cinnamon Light Bulb. And then at 15, I worked for in the Swamp Gas Brass, which, by the way, had no singing. It was just an instrumental group that played Dixieland and jazz. And we appeared at Shakey's Pizza one night a week when I was 15. So my mother had to drive me to the gigs with my drums in her car before I could drive. But then in the 60s, I went on to be in several other groups in junior high and high school. One was called the Ivory Tower. We worked through NBC Booking Agency in Campbell, California, with a gentleman who ran it by the name of Ken Elner, who was the original bass player in a group called the Count Five back in the 60s. It had the hit song Psychotic Reaction that's still around to this day. Also another group called Feather, We worked through Kaleidoscope Booking Agency. That's when I first met Dana, and he had a group called Raw that also worked through the same booking agency. And there were other groups in high school. There was one called Raw Livin', and we one time worked at the Chateau Liberté in the Santa Cruz Mountains, which also started off the Doobie Brothers and other local groups, a Santa Cruz group called Snail, and worked up there a couple times. It was a biker bar. That was during high school. And then later on, after high school, worked in a group called Breakwater, and Doug was in that group with me, Doug Dill, and worked at the Tia Maria Circuit, the Black Angus Circuit, and kept very much employed for a long time. Also worked up at Bear Valley Lodge, and a couple clubs up there in the Bear Valley area in those days. And then, after that, we were renting a practice facility in Campbell behind a music store, and I got to know Dana better there. He shared one of the rehearsal studios there with his group, Raw. Got to know him, and they had an issue with their drummer, and that's how I initially joined Rocket. But they auditioned me, and I was in the group. I knew Marty through a couple of other friends, too, and he had already joined Raw at that point. And the rest is, shall we say, Rocket history.
All right. Now, I know you mentioned it in the beginning, but can you go over what your role was in the group, drums, vocals, and the songs?
Sure. Well, I was the drummer, and also played guitar. I play guitar and played back then, too. I do play guitar on one track on the songs. I play guitar part on Little Things, the song Little Things, which I wrote. And so in the group, I was a singer. I don't want to say I was the lead vocalist because, all four of us sang lead at one point or another. Jeff sang lead, Marty sang lead a lot, Dana sang lead a lot, and so did I. We were all singers. We had a lot of three-part harmonies. And but I perhaps sang a few more songs back in those days. And so I was a singing drummer, which is kind of different. And there were a few other singing drummers around, but I was one of those, so that made me a little different as far as being a drummer goes. And so basically drums, vocals, some guitar on one recording in particular, and I was a songwriter, so I wrote many of the songs that we eventually recorded. And that was what I did.
Okay. On the songs that are on the site, did you write most of those songs?
I wrote, I wrote Do Yourself a Favor. I wrote Satisfied. I wrote Ready, Willing, and Able. I wrote Little Things. I wrote Because I Want You Tonight. I wrote Life on the Line. And The Company. I wrote The Company, too. Mm-hmm. So all those I wrote. Mm-hmm. Dana wrote Ladies in Love. And Dana also wrote The Green Light. Mm-hmm. That are also, recordings on the site.
Okay. What are your favorites?
What are my favorites? Well, I'd say that the best song that I wrote with Rocket probably is Ready, Willing, and Able. And we did a lot of instrumentation on that. Doug Dill worked really hard on the guitar parts on both those songs, Ready, Willing, and Able, and Ladies in Love, to make them unique for his style playing, which was great. He did a great job on them. And those two are my favorites. Ready, Willing, and Able and Little Things are probably my two favorites out of all of them.
Okay. Now, you went to a lot of venues, like you mentioned, like about 3,000 performances over the period of 10 years. You met a lot of celebrities. Can you mention some of your favorites?
Sure. Yeah, over the 10 years, we did, conservative calculations, 3,000 to 4,000 night performances over the years. And we worked all over the state of California.
Oh, this is Mark. This is the end of part 1. Please go to part 2. Thank you. Yes, part 2. Please go to part 2 for the rest of this interview. Thank you.